I've been playing the campaign for over 2 years now. One player in the group has been playing the same sorcerer for the whole entire length of the campaign. Not a single sorcery point has been used. Not one. Her favorite thing to do in combat is rush into melee and use a basic dagger. She has a +1 dagger. She has several other magical items that the party has to beg her to use. She ignores the DM and repeatedly uses spells that do not affect the target, despite the DM and the rest of the party actively telling her that no, her firebolt will not affect the flame skull. She ignores the DM in general. NPC descriptions, world details, dialogues, all are met with her constantly asking for things to just be repeated. She fireballs the party all the time. If we're lucky, we'll get a message saying that she can't make the session 5 minutes before we start. Usually, she just doesn't show up. We can't kick her from the campaign, though, because she's the DM's boss. If this sorceress has access to Fireball, then she no doubt has access to many other incredibly powerful sorcerer abilities. But of course, who needs magic when knife will do just fine? This is my first and honestly really only RPG horror story. All of the people I play with are really nice, and I am happy to have found this ever-expanding group on our Discord server. But there was one that we feared. Let's call him Sir Simp-a-lot. First, a quick note on how he came to our server. Our DM had just cancelled a campaign a few months earlier because 3 players dropped out, though 2 of the 3 with good reasons, like health issues for one and the other moving back to his grandma's place in rural Mexico and simply not having internet for a while. For reference, all the rest of us were in Europe. So our DM wanted to make a new campaign in the same setting, but a couple of 100 years earlier, but only with reliable players. That included myself and 2 other players. I also recruited 1 more player who was playing in my campaign. However, our DM wanted to recruit 1 more guy, so we went into a really big public Discord server and just told people that he was running a campaign. 2 people signed up. 1 turned out to be a lovely dude who only eventually had to drop out due to scheduling issues, but we still occasionally play together. The other was Sir Simp-a-lot. I already questioned my DM. If his goal was only the reliable players, why would he add complete unknowns? And he would never really answer me on that. Anyway, onto the campaign. We were in a cold environment and had to settle the place together with a bunch of NPCs. It was a survival-focused campaign loosely based on Teutonic Knights and their conquest of the Baltics, with Furbolgs as the native Baltics. While all characters were lovely, let's focus on the only 3 that are relevant for the story. The friend I invited played a Furbolg barbarian who was our native guide in the area. His goal was to find a trophy so incredible he could impress a woman and marry her. My character was secretly a human noble, a baronessa, but she was exiled for finding forbidden knowledge, so her fate would have been lifelong imprisonment, death, or trying her luck in the cold north, which she did. On the way, she also became a Raven Queen warlock, and she was also hiding her noble heritage, pretending to be a simple herbologist. Though everyone on the party but one, guess who, figured from session 1 that my character must have been a noble just from the way she spoke and carried herself. Finally, Sir Simp-a-lot, a human paladin who, according to the DM, in the first draft of his backstory, he was the heir to a lost empire that he was trying to restore. DM obviously did not love that, so negotiated it down to a knight. Sir Simp-a-lot also had a squire, whose only personality was that he needed to compulsively praise his master with every sentence. Finally, Sir Simp-a-lot was horny for about every female NPC he saw, while also being incredibly rude and sexist to my character until he finally, in session 3, figured out that not only was my character a noble, but also higher ranking than him. From session 1, there were more problems. He had bad main character syndrome, wanted to initiate every conversation, interrupted others when they finally spoke, and pretty much pissed off almost every NPC with his arrogance and holier-than-thou attitude. And when learning that my character was a noble, he would also spread that fact to pretty much anyone, using it like, you gotta treat us well because we're all nobles. Despite my character insisting that he should not mention it to anyone. He creeped on one NPC in particular. The DM and everyone else were uncomfortable because she kept telling him no, but he kept hitting on her. Meanwhile, my friend the barbarian was also pursuing a Furbolg woman in the village. It was night and day in comparison. He was cordial and not at all pushy. Eventually, the human girl went to the barbarian, saying she will lay in a good word with the Furbolg lady if he can get Sir Simp-a-lot to stop creeping on her. So he tried. He went to Sir Simp-a-Lot and told him to please no longer annoy the poor girl. Sir Simp-a-Lot was outraged. How dare this animal tell a noble what to do? The barbarian offered to give him one of the most prized hunting trophies of the village. Sir Simp-a-Lot, surprisingly, said yes, only to take the human NPC, claiming it was his quote-unquote kill. She responded by throwing him out of the house, of course. I'm always hearing nice guys and incels saying, women are prizes to be won. Didn't think anyone would take it seriously anyway. We jokingly called this event the Simp Bowl 2020. Yeah, it has been a while. Everyone laughed, except for Sir Simp-a-Lot, of course. Don't call me a simp, I'm not a simp! True, incel probably would have been more appropriate, but we didn't go that far. The event that could have gotten us killed happened at the end of Session 3 and the beginnings of Session 4. A bunch of furbolgs attacked our settlement and stole almost all of our food. Remember, survival campaign. We chased after them and caught them, but it was a strange forest. Most of the party did not want to kill the furbolgs for, moral reasons, figuring they only did it to survive, and my character added that this forest was a burial site and a holy place to the furbolgs. Shedding blood there would cause the dead to become restless. So we decided 5-1 to let the furbolgs go with our food and buy some new food at the closest market. Guess who wanted to kill the furbolgs? End of Session 3. Beginning of Session 4, we come back to explain to the settlers that the food is lost, but just when things get heated, the Knights of the Order arrive. These guys are fighting a war against the heathen furbolgs, and were the reason these refugees helped themselves to our supplies. They knew we had let the furbolgs get away with the food because one of the settlers in our village was secretly a snitch for them, so they wanted to confront us. What does Sir Simp-a-Lot do? Well, he just boldly lies to the knights on how we never caught up to the furbolgs. Not even caring, the knights already made it clear they knew exactly what happened. DM is gracious enough to let Sir Simp-a-Lot roll a deception, which lands on a grand total of 7. The knights are starting to get pissed. Collaboration with the enemy is a death sentence after all, so my character tries to explain the situation, rolls a good persuasion check, and manages to chill the knights out. Sir Simp-a-Lot was having none of that. He is the main character after all.
Shut up, woman. You only make the situation worse. Let me handle this.
He talked over me. At this point, my DM had had enough. Get out, he yelled at the top of his lungs and kicked the guy from the server. Awkward silence. I say, thank you. Slowly, everybody starts talking and thanking the DM. The thing is, had the DM not done that, the only logical conclusion to that situation would have been the knights arresting and executing all of us. What happened instead was that Sir Simp-a-Lot's character was taken prisoner alone, as he honorably offered to take the blame for all of us. Thank you, Sir Simp-a-Lot. Your sacrifice will be forever remembered. TLDR. Sexist guy with no social skills joins the campaign, thinks he's the main character, and lies to the face of a group that can and will easily kill us. DM decides to kick the guy, instead of TPKing the whole party. That was the proper move on the DM's part. Yeah, TPKing the party, basically on behalf of somebody who's trying to ruin the game for people, is definitely not a good idea. Sexism is bad. Don't be sexist. That's kind of a duh. Main character syndrome, also bad, but something we've talked about a lot. Here, let's talk about romance. D&D romance is something that comes up so many times in this channel, whether it's incels trying to romance a player in real life or nice guys trying to romance NPCs in-game. It's never, ever good here. Of course, that's in a series called RPG Horror Stories. What did we expect? Obviously, these guys don't care about this kind of thing, but if you want to do a romance in your D&D game, the #1 rule is to make sure that everyone is comfortable, even if it's an NPC. Yeah, it's not a player character, it's not being played by a player, but it's being played by the DM. You need to make sure your DM is comfortable. If they're not comfortable, then it's not going to work out. Simple as that. So, for some context, I had been playing in a 3.5 campaign with the same DM for about 3 years, and about 3 months ago, the bomb dropped and I finally left the table. Granted, I had already gone through about 5 characters in this campaign, and there were plenty of times that I felt things were wholly unfair, but this one just took the cake. Not to mention, I was the longest lasting player at this table, and I have seen several people come and go over and over again, and I just kept trucking along because I cared about the DM and did not want to hurt his feelings. I am still friends with this man because I do still care about him as a friend, but I will never play at his table again. Another thing I must mention is that we often found magical items, or had to buy them for extreme amounts of gold, and often they were cursed or lost soon later. We used them to fight against the often deadly encounters disguised as quote-unquote easy. So here's the cast. DM is the DM, Jacqueline is myself, my albino Minotaur Factorum, Karash, the lizard folk variant cleric, Viv, the human war mage, and Akira, the monkey person monk. We had recently left a dwarven city and we were on our way to our next quest location. The session ended and we had to take a bit before we could play again. Meanwhile, my mother gets the Rona and passes it to me. As I lay bedridden, sick as all hell, I get a call on Facebook Messenger from the DM. "Hey Jacqueline, we were wondering if you want to play over the phone." Nah guys, I'm sorry. I am pretty much dying right now. I don't have the energy to play. I hope that you guys have fun though. "You sure?" "Yeah, no, sorry. I can't even lift my head really right now." "Alright, well, feel better soon." Now at this point, I am assuming that the rest of the party was there and that they would be fine. However, as it turns out, Viv was also absent because she was busy, but she was assured that there would be no gameplay that night. So, unknown to either of us, the DM held a vote with the other remaining players and they voted to play. I didn't hear from them for about 3 hours until Akira says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, guys." After my sarcastic, like what happened? To my horror, I was told that both my character and Viv's character had died due to a ridiculous amount of damage with no saves and no chance of survival. As it turns out, during a standard night as the party camped out at an abandoned tower, the DM rolled a random encounter that caused some specters to appear and attack the party doing strength damage. Note, my character and Viv's characters were both sound asleep and not woken up once during this entire encounter. As a last-ditch effort, Akira threw some 60 enchanted ball bearings which turned into incorporeal, full-sized cannonballs. Though these were incorporeal, they apparently did very corporeal damage. They flew into the building's walls and dealt 1,428 bludgeoning damage to the building, causing it to collapse. Of course, there were no death saving throws or checks to avoid the damage, and Jacqueline and Viv were instantly crushed. I couldn't believe it. While I am sick as hell and the other party member is under the impression that we weren't even playing, the DM allows our characters to instantly die and without any chance to save ourselves. He then tells us that we are welcome to roll and see if we get an afterlife quest, which we only get if we roll a natural 20. Viv chews him out and leaves the group chat immediately. I tell the others that I need some time to chill out and rest. I messaged them in the morning saying that I am also leaving the table, as this was the last straw of unfair garbage. I take the time to assure them that I still want to be friends, but I cannot play this campaign anymore, and explained what exactly I had a problem with. After my long message, DM messaged me back saying that it was a random encounter and it was out of his control and that it was an easy encounter anyway. I told him that this response hurt me and made me feel like he wasn't even listening, and I left the group chat. No, D&D is far better than bad D&D, and it took me 3 years to realize that. As I said, I'm still friends with him, and he recently told me that his little sister is wanting to start playing D&D and asked him to DM. He said he would have to make some changes, and I said, "Oh, so you're gonna make it easier for her because it's her first campaign?" And he responded, "Oh no, just less grimdark. Godspeed, little adventurer. I hope that this doesn't turn you away from D&D. I have other stories from this campaign that I could tell, but this is just the most recent. I hope it was entertaining and informative, and for any new players, a lesson. If your DM seems to take pleasure in killing your characters, that is a red flag that it may be time to find a new table." I'm going to talk more about Friendly Fire Insta-Kill later in the video. I'm recording this one last, but yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Friendly Fire Insta-Kill is not fun, and it's even worse because they were not even there. Look, if a player is not present for your session, it's probably a bad idea to kill off their character. Unless death is like super unbelievably common in your game, it's gonna feel cheap, as I cannot imagine somebody enjoying having their character die while they're not present, especially in a story-rich game. There are many ways to keep a character safe while the player is not present, but yeah, just killing them off definitely does not list among those ways. So lately, I've been going through my backlog of horror stories and posting them here, and I think I've come to my worst experience, which isn't so bad compared to many of the stories here, thanks DM. This happened a little less than a year ago. So, our cast. Myself playing a golden dragonborn bard who was a former circus performer. He was something of a pacifist, but I built him to be a massive buff/debuff character, so it worked. Wizard, a human who was a noble and oh so amazing, righteous, and blah blah blah. She was the problem player of the group. Fighter, a half-orc and great dude all around. He was a voice of reason at the table and good friends with the DM. He's also new. Rogue, completely unimportant to the story. He was smart enough to just not get involved. DM? Just a really good DM. So that aside, the story. We started at level 3 and issues began cropping up at about early level 4 with Wizard. We thought she was neutral good, but just turned out to be neutral ass. They would try to veto any plans we made because she was clearly the only smart one. We said, well, no, sure the half-orc was a himbo, but myself and the rogue always had a relatively smooth plan most times, as much as one can have in D&D at least. She would fire back saying that the rogue was clearly too stupid to get a job, as they grew up on the streets and as a thief, and I was just an idiot who could sing. I would really do my best to ignore this, but I would often go back at her, and quite frankly, not a great idea, but hindsight is 2020. Her plans were pretty much just to burn everything and everyone to the ground, more or less. One of her personality traits is that I always try to find a peaceful solution. If a plan didn't involve magic, she'd go against it. If it was led by anyone but her, she'd go against it. You know the deal by this point. All this came to a head when we were attending a masquerade which one of the BBEG's generals was attending. Plan was to use the wizard's nobility to effectively get me a pass to talk to the general, and hopefully, with some high charisma rolls, I could get him to slip up a bit, spill some info. Now apparently this general used to attend my character's circus performances when he was a kid and recognized my character after a few minutes of conversation and started pretty much parading my character around the masquerade. It was mostly for a good laugh to relieve some tension at the table, but Wizard did not like that. Now DM, in all of his DMing skill, was smart enough to keep Wizard preoccupied with other nobles and friends from her wizard college so that she wouldn't immediately blow up our plan. Once she saw my character being shown off, she did the following. General, Miss Wizard, it's a pleasure to see... DM, I cast Charm Person. I mean, are you sure? Yes, I cast Charm Person on the General. Well, okay. So, as you're casting, your friends from college recognize the verbal and somatic components of the spell and rush over to stop you, calling the guards over. Wait, what? My character doesn't do any of that. She doesn't need to do any of that to cast. Yes, she does. Everyone does. That's BS. You're just trying to screw me over. Finally. Wizard then threw her D10 at the fighter and stormed off without her stuff. She did not return for the dice. Fighter got his first set of his very own dice that day. Well, at least somebody got free dice. This is another case of main character syndrome, and yeah, it really sucks. I don't understand getting upset when somebody else gets a spotlight. And if you feel like your character isn't getting enough attention in the campaign, I think that's reasonable. But you mend that issue by talking to the DM out of game, instead of trying to ruin people's moments in-game. All that does is create bitterness. It's natural that some characters are going to take the spotlight sometimes and other characters are going to step into the background. That is going to happen in an ensemble story like Dungeons & Dragons with a party. But aside from the in-game storytelling aspects, out of game, you're a group of friends trying to tell a story together. Everyone should get their time to shine. So I started running Tomb of Annihilation for some friends. All was well, aside from Problem Player. We'll call him by his character name, Unga Mokaka Bunga. Yes, that was his player character name. Unga was a Dragonborn wizard with 11 intelligence. You read that correctly, 11 intelligence for a wizard. He actually had a reasonable backstory as to why. Due to his old aging, his mind started to wander and drift, eventually turning into dementia, and thus his youthful intelligence was dramatically failing. I actually wrote to him for an hour, expressing I'd love to make a small side quest journey for him and the party to find a relic around level 10 or so that could give him back his intelligence. 22 is what I set it to. But alas, that is where the story begins. Session 1, he decides to initially start the campaign by throwing rocks at our halfling. Everyone notices and questions him as to why? Because he can, he replies. Okay, we all just shrug it off and moved on to Syndra's Manor, as we called in. He proceeds to try and cast a spell on the titular Syndra, to which I have her bind him with a spell as a legendary reaction. I know that's not how it works, but he tried to cast Hideous Laughter on her, and I wanted to prevent a TPK on day 1. After some back and forth, RP talking with the PCs, they get teleported to Port Nyanzara. Unga immediately starts to throw rocks at some children in the streets, to which a guard sees and tells him to not cause trouble. He retorts with, yet again, trying to cast a spell on the guard. I let him cast Friend on the guard and get out of trouble for this instance. Later on, the same guard finds him roaming around aimlessly. He split from the party to break into houses, and the guard proceeds to bang him over the head with a gauntlet and drag him back to the party. Session 1 ends there. Can you tell I'm trying to not have him derail so hard that the story just falls apart? Session 2. Finally, after so much derailment from him, they get a guide and head off. This is where he starts to show his true idiocy. Night falls, and I roll random encounters, and it comes up as a yes. 4 zombies. Initiative is rolled, and Unga is going second after the paladin. Unga's turn comes, and proceeds to cast Disguise Self and look like the undead attacking the camp. Did he tell the player characters? No. The guide? Oh, no. Our cleric, the halfling, was asleep when combat started, so she for sure would not have seen that happen. I had her roll initiative at the top to turn order, and she ended up getting higher than the paladin. So she comes up, half asleep and minorly drunk. She saw a quote-unquote undead beside her tent and proceeds to cast Inflict Wounds. Yes, I know, necrotic damage against an undead, but to her credit, her character was being woken up in a panic and was still coming down from being drunk, so she did the first thing she thought of in a panic state. She hit and proceeded to do 26 necrotic damage to Unga. He was dead right on the spot, no save. Nothing, because he only had 9 HP. She did almost 3 times his max HP in one attack, making it a savage attack, I think it's called, I'm not sure. I almost have never seen them occur. Due to the death curse of Tomb of Annihilation, Unga was dead forever. After this attack killed him, the player himself got very angry at us for ganging up on him and trying to kill him since we started playing. He literally flipped the table we had in the game store, sending miniatures, terrain miniatures, and building/houses flying, breaking a few of the store's items we had borrowed and were allowed to use. He then punched me in the gut, then tore the hell out of the store once the workers saw the commotion that was happening. Police were called, camera surveillance was reviewed, and he was apprehended not too far from the store. He lived over 2 hours away, and I was his only ride. So yeah, carpooling. I didn't press charges, but the store did for the vandalism he caused and banned him from life from the location, and all other locations they have in the city. So yeah, that was an interesting Friday, to say the least. The other players are more than happy that we not only ejected him from the campaign, but also from the friend group. We have another session planned for Friday, and I am looking forward to it, instead of dreading it. Now, of course, if this situation were to come up in my own game, I probably wouldn't let the Inflict Wounds just insta-kill the player. I would have done something to prevent that from happening, because getting killed instantly by friendly fire does suck. However, nothing that happens in the fun tabletop role-playing game is going to justify vandalism and then physical assault. You cannot beat up your dungeon master. Probably not a good idea. This guy is playing a character with a very intrusive flaw in the form of his incredibly low intelligence. And while there are really great ways to play that to make the game more interesting, you can also play it in a way that is annoying, aka this way. I did say earlier I wouldn't allow the insta-kill friendly fire, but with a character like this, I wouldn't have been too broken up about it. Alright, and that is everything I have for you guys today. If you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories, then please do leave a like to let me know. If you guys want to see more of my content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tips series, general advice for both DMs and players, old and new. And while you're there in the cards, you might as well subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, please do leave the comment RIP game table to reference the fallen game table of the police story and to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And as like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.